Adventures from the Comic Diary, May 2026. Let's get straight into this. In May, I read 26 single issues, a little less than April, but given how busy May was, I think it's still a pretty good reading list. Mostly DC and especially Superman, but I think that would be obvious at this point. As always, I recount recent issues first, then any rereads, and finally stuff from the backlogs. So let's get into it. New stuff. Superman 37 Primetime Part 2. Another amazing Superman issue from Joshua Williamson and Dan Mora. It's been so fantastic going through these issues and seeing how the pair of them play with this idea of a character being from our world. It's clear in this issue that Prime is getting very uncomfortable by just how little trust people have in him. We even see with Martin Parr Kent that they are clearly uncomfortable right at the beginning, and the fact that they do take the time to actually talk to him does seem to help here. There's a fantastic conversation with Damian, who is naturally distrustful of Prime. I think Damian is someone who goes through a lot of the same reactions people have for Prime. The people go from loving the little guy to calling him irredeemable. Prime, having knowledge of the comics, asks Damian how he feels about having to constantly worry about how people will see him. In typical Damian fashion, he says he doesn't care, but as Prime is about to leave, we get a really great quote from Damian. I lied before when you asked me about my rep. I do care. It took people not judging me by my worst moments, but change wasn't easy. It took time. You just need to keep trying. Batman number 9. I've expressed my mixed feelings on Fraction's run, but I am starting to warm to it. Getting into issue 9, it did feel like there was a little bit of time missing. The end of issue 8 showed a public announcement that the GCPD are now against Batman, and now suddenly there is a raid on Batman and his team. Compared to the rest of the series pacing, this does feel a little rushed, but it does lead to a very solid issue all round. Bruce is still talking to the apparition of Alfred, which shows us two things. One, Bruce still hasn't gotten over the death of Alfred, understandably. And two, all the things we see Alfred saying are clearly things Bruce knows, but needs to hear through the lens of someone else. In this case, it's the fact that Bruce doesn't give Damian enough space to make mistakes, that he's not a great father and needs to be able to put trust in Damian. This leads to Bruce actually giving Damian the most responsibility in this current operation, and it's a good move forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Book of L number 8. What I loved about this issue is that it finally gives us an explanation for Firis's existence. Up until now, we knew that Firis was the son of Superman and Cersei, which felt a little off, given that would mean Superman and Cersei would have been in a relationship at some point. While there can be different scenarios where that works, the explanation we finally get makes so much sense. It calls back to Action Comics 1060, where Superman picks up a cursed artifact. It ends up taking some of Superman's DNA, which then leads to the creation of Firis. We also find out that one of Superman's descendants is part Tamaranian, which is really interesting idea. Plus we continue to see Superman being a really awesome father to Ossel. Daredevil number 2. This was another very relatable issue, especially as someone who does teach university students. There is this interaction where Matt asks the students a question and the students respond that they've only learned what doesn't count for something, not what counts. So Matt tells them to work backwards. You'd be surprised how often this exact wording comes up in classes. I think when we're focusing so hard on one particular aspect, we forget how that information can be reverse engineered or used to explain other aspects. Again, a really solid issue, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Rereads. DC Comics Presents number 85. So I reread this fantastic issue, but to be honest, I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Instead, I'm going to go tell you to subscribe to The Brass Mango, where recently we spoke and did a really in-depth conversation about this issue, and hopefully that'll be posted soon. It's such a fantastic issue, it revolves around Superman and Swamp Thing, plus it's an Alan Moore issue. It was really fun, and please just go subscribe to The Brass Mango anyway. Backlog. Again, probably the biggest part of my recap. The first thing I read, Krisis of the Crimson Kryptonite. So I've been going through Superman's post-Crisis releases in order, but given the section I've got to is one that I'm studying for a conference paper, I decided to skip ahead to continue reading for fun, and this took me to the Krisis of the Crimson Kryptonite storyline. I didn't know what I was expecting going in, but I cannot stress enough just how much I loved this story. It starts with Luthor being visited by Mixia Spitlick, who is too busy to do his regular meddling session with Superman, so gives Luthor red kryptonite, telling him that it will bring Superman to his level. This is something Luthor initially misunderstands and assumes it'll give him powers, powers. Instead, Superman completely loses his powers. Superman naturally panics, especially as his powers fade, while taking a villain to prison. Superman ends up going to Emil to try and figure out what's going on, even bringing in Starman for help. And the way Superman does get his powers back, which I am genuinely not going to spoil because it's such a fantastic reveal, is genius. But what's great about the story is that no matter how much Clark is panicking over the situation, he's still such an amazing boyfriend to Lois. Lois's mother is in the hospital, and Clark does drop everything when needed to make sure she and her family are okay. I'm not gonna lie, I love Superman, and stuff like this just makes me love him even more. Also, this is the story where Clark and Lois get engaged, and during Clark's loss of powers, we see moments where we do realise just how much Clark does take his powers for granted. Shaving, getting from place to place, even just quickly changing. He states that it gives him a newfound respect for Batman. There's this amazing paneling where Clark is leaving and trying to figure out how to go about his life, and as he does, Starman disguised as Superman flies overhead. I really loved this, and it does highlight just how much I adore this era of Superman comics. Ultimate Universe #1. Not a lot to say about this, but it is essentially the beginning of the Ultimate stuff going on in the Ultimate Universe. My only experience with the Ultimate Universe so far has been Spider-Man, and I finally decided to take a look at the rest of it. If you want something more in depth, go look at Owen Likes Comics. He's been going into it way more than I have. But in this issue, we see the team beginning to form, Thor being broken out of Asgard in prison and being accompanied by Lady Sif, and we see the blowing up of New York, which gets blamed on Tony Stark. It's a good setup issue, but I really need to read more. Adventures of Superman #473. This was a very one-off issue, but it does show a nice team up between Superman, Guy Gardner, and Hal Jordan. We get some good character moments between the three, including the revelation that Clark doesn't actually know Hal's name, which greatly surprises Guy. The three of them end up rescuing a creature who's been buried in Wyoming and allowing it to escape from Earth. It's a nice little story, but not much else. Action Comics 660. Lex Luthor dies. Well, let's face it, no one really dies in comics, but as far as we know at this point, it does appear that Lex Luthor is dead. Lex is having repeated dreams about the Grim Reaper, in which the Grim Reaper reveals himself to be Superman. Upon waking up, Lex decides that he wants to make an impact again with what time he has left, and considers the work he used to do with jets. Cut to Lex, as a publicity stunt, flying his new plane with the top pilot on board. While flying, Lex ejects the pilot and crashes the plane. What's very telling is that as soon as Clark hears the news, he races to the crash site and finds the seat had not been ejected and Lex's robot hand now remains. There is some very interesting backstory surrounding Lex's doctor, which does genuinely make you feel sorry for her. I really wonder what people thought of this issue when it came out. And so the problem with reading it now is that I know Lex will come back as his supposed son. I guess it's like any death in comics, you wonder how it will be received at the time. Superman #51. This is the first issue of the Triangle Age, which is really fun to finally get to. In terms of this issue, the most interesting stuff about it is the thing it is foreshadowing. The mysterious Mr. Z talks about how he claims to have met Superman in World War II, which foreshadows the time and time again story. We also see a lot of background information about what is happening to LexCorp now that Lex has supposedly passed away. We learn that there is no heir named in the will, which will lead to Lex's return later. There's some great use of messing with panel construction and presentation when it comes to scenes set inside Mr. Zed's crystal. I love stuff like this, so that did make the issue more memorable in one way. Adventures of Superman #474. This issue may be my favourite of the early 90s that I've read so far. It's very somber and well expressed. It gives a lot of context to the way Clark is about his friends. The issue takes place on New Year's Eve, where we see Clark visiting a comatose patient at the hospital. The parents are there because they've been finally granted the right to shut off their son's life support. The young man in the bed is Scott, a childhood friend of Clark's. Scott's parents initially ask Clark to leave, but Clark instead asks if he can just say goodbye. In doing so, he tells the parents about what happened the night Scott fell into a coma. It happened during a house party in high school. Scott was one of the few people who was nice to Clark, Pete, and Lana, and even invited them to a party. All four of them do drink, despite the fact that Clark, Pete, and Lana now need to travel home, and Scott offers to drive them home, which they do take. Clark, still very unaware of the extent of his powers, wonders why he doesn't feel drunk, so offers to drive instead, but it's turned down, and this leads to the car crashing. Pete and Lana are injured, and Clark is untouched, but Scott is gravely injured and ends up in a coma, one that he has never woken up from. Clark blames himself for what happened. At the time, he was extremely confused as to why he didn't feel drunk, and does believe that the others told him that he was still probably too drunk to drive. But looking at it in hindsight, he does think that if he just insisted on driving the car that night, no one would have gotten hurt. It's something that Clark thinks about a lot, and ultimately led to him coming to the hospital this night, not just to say goodbye to Scott, but to beg his parents for forgiveness. And it leads to a very telling quote from Clark. Strange, until tonight I didn't know if I'd ever realised just what a profound impact that accident had on me. It taught me that there's only one way to live life. You gotta do the right thing. The world fosters countless tragedies, and all you can do as individuals is try to prevent even one of them from happening. I love this issue, and after reading it, I did just have to sit with it for a moment. It's one I've added to the list that I want to find in singles. Action Comics number 661. Not a lot to say about this one. It's an issue mostly built on coincidences. It teases inter-gang stuff to come, and does feature a Plastic Man. Outside of that, not a lot to say. Superman number 52. In this issue, we see a little more of the downfall of LexCorp. There's a lot of environmental messages throughout, especially with the primary point being Terror Man attempting to clean up a town that is essentially poisonous. But ultimately, this issue is a massive turning point for Superman. It's the point where he decides he has to tell Lois that Superman and Clark are the same person. Adventures of Superman number 475. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't like this issue. Sleaze is back, he's kidnapping people at an amusement park that's already being run by criminals, and Jimmy Olsen decides he needs to put his signal watch on. Other than that, I just didn't enjoy this one. Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey number 1. I debated covering this issue here, mostly it's because it's one of 3 and I haven't read issues 2 and 3, but I thought I'd just throw it in here quickly. I'll probably cover it more when I read the others. But the one thing I did want to say is this issue is much bloodier than I'd expected. Notably, it is missing the Comics Code Authority logo. There is this great scene where Clark likens his fear of Doomsday to his fear of the basement as a kid. This is the first story to use Doomsday since the death of Superman, so I'm anxious to see where this is going. Action Comics number 662 and Superman number 53. Secrets in the Night. This is finally the issue where Superman reveals his identity to Lois. Having read the John Byrne run and knowing just how convoluted Lois must think the Superman and Clark's relationship is, this must have sort of been a long time coming and also very confusing to her. She does essentially have to deal with the idea that 2 people have been gaslighting her the entire time. Leading into the next issue, we do see that she needs time to process all of this, and this is extremely understandable from her point. It's a landmark issue and one that contrasts Clark's apprehension about telling Lois with an oncoming threat of Silver Banshee. Action Comics 1087 to 1095. Finally, I started catching up on Mark Waid's Action Comics run. From 1087 onwards, it's framed as Clark remembering his childhood and how important the Metropolis Expo was to him making his public debut. In 1088, there's a cute nod to Lois Lane still being the one to name Superman, or in this case Superboy. We see Clark struggling to learn how to use his powers, particularly the anxiety of going public and starting high school. His new popularity as Superboy means he needs to make Clark Kent far more normal. When a fire breaks out in the chemical lab, Clark jumps into action to save his friends, but also uncovers faults and cut corners in the school's safety system. When he confronts the principal, we see Superboy having to learn in real time how he presents himself to others. This also leads to Clark's history teacher revealing that he knows Clark is Superboy, and he's also superpowered. Mr. Blake, the teacher, reveals himself to be the former hero, Captain Comet, and his presence does put Clark on edge, but also leads to Clark having to learn new lessons surrounding his powers, how he uses them, and how he needs to be seen by those around him. Unknown to Clark at the time, Captain Comet has been talking to General Lane. Eventually, Clark does get confronted by the military, which, as Mr. Blake says, it teaches Clark that he needs to know how to navigate people, how to be a trusted figure. It's revealed that Mr. Blake isn't well, and he's been trying to teach Clark as he knows the Earth will be in good hands when he's gone. From here, we see Clark still learning to adapt his powers to different situations, including his current self commenting on things he's learned since then. When the military does show up in Smallville, it's not violence or fighting that fixes the situation, it's Clark being able to sit down and talk with the general. A lot of these issues do help to show Clark's journey from being just a superpowered kid to eventually Superman. There's an issue that focuses on a dodgy bank manager foreclosing on many of the farms in Smallville, including the Kents. This is an issue that does show Clark learning that that he doesn't always have to be the one to save people, such as with Pete being the one to de-escalate a situation, and that sometimes just understanding who to turn to with the right information can be more impactful than throwing a punch. The second to last issue I read brings Clark's conversation with General Lane full circle, where he asks Superboy to help bring soldiers home from a war zone. It's a situation that really sets up the complexities of Clark's life. When coming home from the war zone, Clark comments, "I wasn't ready to be a soldier. I'd have to find some other way to honor my arrangement with the general. I wasn't sure what I was feeling that day, except that it was a lot, and it was all over the place. I do remember it sinking in that becoming Superboy had made my world smaller, not bigger. I had Ma and Pa to open up to, but no one else. It's not like I could tell Lana about holding a dead soldier in my arms, or how confused it felt to have more power than any adult. Keeping a big secret as a teenager can be unbearably isolating. It wasn't fair that I had no one my age to tell me I wasn't as alone as I felt sometimes." It's something Clark expresses very somberly, and while camping with Pete, he wonders whether or not he should tell Pete. At the end, he decides that it wouldn't be fair, stating, "But what gives me the right? My double identity was already one of the biggest secrets in the world, and a massive weight. Who was I to burden Pete with that, without his even asking? What kind of a friend would that make me? No, at the end of the day, no matter how much it hurt, I had to do right by Pete. He could never know." And right on cue, Pete finds out without Clark realizing. The final issue I read largely focuses on Pete trying to figure out Clark's motives and why he hasn't told him and Lana about it. At the end, Pete sees just how much worry Clark has in terms of the safety of his friends, and from here, Pete vows to secretly help Clark where he can. Overall, my reading in May was limited, but pretty fun. I've got a freelance editing gig on top of my usual output, so I'll probably still be reading sporadically, but I still love reading comics and making notes as I read. In terms of housekeeping, we hit 3K subs. Thank you all for helping me reach this. I'm hoping to put out better videos as we go. I also got my very first channel member, so thank you very much, Brassmango. I don't have any perks at the moment. I'm not even sure what I would offer, but I have been slowly putting up little emojis. The first one is of my cat, Fen. While you might say it's not very comics related, she's actually the namesake for the Dark Star of the Fen in Green Lantern War Journal. That's her comic connection, and that's my justification. Anyway, that was my May. What did you read over the month? As always, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and till next time.